Hello everyone and welcome to the Sky This Month for April 2024. My name's Paul Martinaitis and this show is brought to you by the Astronomical Society of South Australia. So being middle of autumn now in April is a wonderful time of year to be observing. Up high near the zenith we've got of course some really great constellations such as Vela, Carina, Puppis, Canis Major and so on. And also in the northern part of the sky, we're starting to get some of those great galaxy constellations starting to come in view, such as Virgo, Coma Berenices, and also Leo, which will be the constellation of the month for April. And we'll certainly talk about that a little bit later in the show. We've also got some interesting planetary alignments in the morning, in the pre-dawn hours. And we've also got two comets, which you won't want to miss this year. So let's begin by doing a tour of the sky. So we're looking at the sky as it'll appear on the 12th of April at about 9:30 p.m. in the evening. So that's about 2 hours after the end of astronomical twilight for this time of year. So looking first down in the lower west, we can see Orion is pretty much about to set. So unfortunately, it's we have to say goodbye to one of our favourite constellations for now. And wait for it to become more favourable again late spring, early summer, later on in the year. Looking a little bit further up, constellations such as Canis Major, that's still well positioned at the moment at about 45 degrees above the horizon. And to the right of it, here's Monoceros, the unicorn. It's quite a faint constellation, but it has some wonderful objects in it. And in the December show, December 2023, it was the constellation of the month, and we talked about some of the best objects in that constellation, including the Rosette Nebula, a wonderful emission nebula, also Hubble's Variable Nebula, which is relatively unique in it's a nebula that actually can change its appearance over relatively small timescales of weeks to months, and also the Christmas tree cluster. So if you missed the December show, you might want to go back and just take a look at the constellation of the month section. And it's actually not too late to view those objects. Monoceros is still high enough to get a reasonable view. Looking higher up still towards the zenith, we can see the Argo Navis constellations of Vela, Puppis, Carina and Pyxis are pretty much in their optimal position now, so make sure you take advantage of that at the moment. And in particular, in the last show, we talked about some objects kind of in this region surrounding the zenith, including an object in Vela, including the 8-burst nebula. We also looked at an object in Pyxis, which was NGC 2818, which is one of two readily available examples of an open cluster which appears to have a planetary nebula in it. So NGC 2818, which we covered in the last show, and also the other example is M46 in Puppis, which we talked about in the February show. Looking towards the north now, and if you're like me and you love galaxies, this is a really great time of year, so-called galaxy season, because constellations such as Leo, which will be the constellation of the month for April, Virgo, and Coma Berenices, and even Canis Venatici down below there, they're now starting to rise up and show some of the best galaxies and brightest galaxies available in the sky. So it'll be good viewing throughout April, May, and even into early June. So just zooming in a bit, and you can just see as I zoom in, each of those little red ellipses is actually a galaxy. So we're going to talk more about some of the finest galaxies in Leo a little bit later. But while we're in this region too, be sure just to take a look at this region in the Virgo cluster of galaxies. In particular, there's a chain of galaxies called Macarian's chain. And the best way I find to sort of locate it is if you draw a line between Beta Leonis at the tip of Leo here and Epsilon Virginis here. So if you imagine a straight line between those two stars, and if you go about to the middle and scan your telescope in there, the first galaxies you'll probably see are these very two bright ellipticals. They're massive elliptical galaxies, really bright, M84 and M86. And then what I like to do is, using a relatively wide angle eyepiece, you can just simply scan along. A Macarian's chain kind of goes in this direction here. And as you sweep your eyepiece, you can just take in the wonderful view of seeing all these different galaxies float past. These two galaxies here are sometimes called Macarian's eyes, because they kind of look like two eyes peering at you. And so in some cases, if you position the eyepiece correctly, you can get 8 or 9 galaxies in the same field of view, which I think is wonderful. So you can kind of sweep all the way from M84 and M86 all the way down here to the bottom, NGC 4479. So while we're in this part of the sky, if we look up towards the zenith, of course, snaking its way all the way across the sky is the longest constellation of them all, which is Hydra. There's some great objects in Hydra, including many galaxies, but two that we shouldn't really miss. One that I've highlighted many times before and is familiar to you is the so-called Ghost of Jupiter Nebula, NGC 3242. That's now placed really at its optimum point up near the zenith, so you won't want to miss looking at that. And the other object that we don't want to miss, of course, is M83 in Hydra. That's also nice and high at the moment. That is one of the finest face-on spirals anywhere, particularly in the south of the southern skies. So make sure you take a look at that as well. Looking to the south now, and we can see, just if we look towards the southeast, Scorpius is just coming above the horizon now. So just as Orion is setting, Scorpius is rising, because they're kind of almost at opposite ends of the celestial sphere. So that, of course, means that we're now heading towards winter once we see Scorpius. Looking a bit higher up, Centaurus is very well placed at the moment, as well as the Southern Cross. And also just below the Southern Cross is a somewhat perhaps less observed or constellation of Musca the Fly. But there are some great objects in Musca. And we actually covered Musca in the July 2023 show. So if you didn't catch that show, maybe I invite you to go back and take a look at the Constellation of the Month section for the July 2023 show, where we covered some of the lovely objects in Musca, including 2 globular clusters and some very interesting double stars as well. So we'll now take a look at the lunar calendar for April. So one of the good things about this time of year, of course, the sun's starting to set earlier, and also daylight saving ends on the 7th of April. So it means we can start observing a lot earlier in the evening now. So on the 1st of April, darkness began at 20:27 and went through to about 6:08 in the morning. By the 30th of April, of course, because daylight saving had ended on the 7th, and of course the sun is setting earlier, darkness begins at around 9 p.m. in the evening and goes through to 5:23 a.m. in the morning. So the dark period where the moon won't interfere with our observations began on the 1st of the month, and that'll go right through to about the 14th or so. You can extend that a bit later if you're prepared to stay up, towards midnight or later. So the moon phases, last quarter was on the 2nd, new moon will be on the 9th, first quarter will be on the 16th, and full moon will be on the 24th. Looking at the solar system now during April, we can see firstly in the evenings, not a good time to be viewing the planets. Mercury is becoming lost in the evening twilight, and also Jupiter and Uranus will appear quite close to the sun, so they'll be setting earlier, and then as the month progresses, they'll become more and more lost in the evening twilight. In the morning, however, things are much more interesting. As the month progresses, Mercury will come out of inferior conjunction with the sun on about the 12th and become a morning object. And also Venus as well will be visible around mid-month. However, that'll start becoming lost in the dawn twilight as it moves in behind the sun. There will be some very interesting alignments, however, and the main planets to watch will be Mars and Saturn. So on the 11th of April, in particular, Mars and Saturn will be very close. They'll come to within about half a degree of each other. So from the naked eye, you'll probably just be able to separate them. And certainly they will be in the same telescopic field. So be sure to try and get your binoculars, or even better, any sort of telescope out, and you'll be able to see Mars and Saturn in the same field of view. Then, perhaps more interestingly, a little bit later on towards the end of the month, on the 29th of April, Mars will appear to move away from Saturn, but it will actually then be very closely aligned with Neptune from our perspective. So I think they'll be, again, about half a degree apart. So you'll actually be able to fit Mars and Neptune in the same telescopic field of view. So not only will they make a great contrast, the beautiful pale blue with the red of Mars. If you haven't seen Neptune before, this is a wonderful opportunity to find it, because all you got to do is find Mars, which you can't miss, and then look at it through a telescope, and you'll find Neptune there in the same field of view. So this shows you the situation that we just mentioned previously, where on the 11th of April at 6 a.m. in the morning, so just before as the sun is rising, and you can see just above the horizon there, you'll see Venus sort of in the dawn twilight. And then further up, Saturn and Mars will be very close, within half a degree of each other. So you'll be able to separate them with the naked eye. They'll be about as far apart as the size of the full moon. But the great thing will be if you can get your binoculars out, as you can see here on the right, you'll be able to really contrast those colours by seeing them so close together. And they're roughly the same magnitude at the moment. So, of course, you'll have the deep red of Mars contrasting with the pale yellowish colour of Saturn. And even better, if you can get some sort of telescope into the field. So this shows you a simulated view through a 12-inch telescope at 72 times. You'll be able to see reddish Mars, and, of course, the beautiful rings on Saturn as well. And at this time, of course, this year, the rings are appearing virtually edge-on at the moment. Now, looking a little bit later on in the month, towards the 29th, Saturn has appeared to move away from Mars, but now Mars and Neptune are within half a degree of each other. So this is an excellent opportunity to have a look at Neptune if you haven't found it before. Mars you can't miss. It's one of the brightest objects in the sky, very red. So if you turn your telescope towards Mars, you should see Neptune in the same field of view. And also down near the horizon, Mercury has now re-emerged as a dawn object as well. So this just shows you a simulated view through a 80mm refractor at around 15 times, and you can see there the bright Mars, and then about half a degree away, which is a distance roughly of the size of the full moon, you should see a pale blue dot, and that will be Neptune. And if you're under a dark sky, it may also be possible to pick up Neptune in a pair of binoculars as well. 2024 should be a great year for observing comets. So we're going to talk about two in particular that you won't want to miss. The first one is 12P Pons-Brooks. So Pons-Brooks is a periodic comet. So the 12P indicates that it was the 12th such comet to be discovered. The first periodic comet to be discovered was, of course, probably the most famous comet of all, Comet Halley. And they have quite a similar period. Pons-Brooks has a period of 71 years compared to the 76-year period of Halley. So these are sometimes called once-in-a-lifetime comets because you've got to be extremely fortunate to see them more than once in your lifetime because of the timing and, of course, the size of the period. So Pons-Brooks will reach perihelion on the 21st of April at around 1.5 astronomical units from Earth. So the observing window for southern observers will begin on the 27th when it emerges far enough from the sun and the moon won't be interfering, and it will go through to about the 11th of May. And it will appear early in the western evening sky. So you'll want to get to yourself somewhere, preferably in a rural location where there's less light pollution, where you've got a clear view of the western horizon, because it will only appear about 10 degrees above the horizon. And it should reach around magnitude 4, so it will be visible with the naked eye. So this just shows you where the path will be. So the horizon's here. So on the 27th of April, it'll appear pretty much between Aldebaran here in Taurus and Zeta Eridani here towards the left. And then as the month progresses, it'll steadily move upwards, as you can see there by the path. The other comet you definitely won't want to miss this year is A3 Sushin Atlas. That's predicted to be at its best viewing in September and October, and it may even be a so-called great comet. It has the potential to reach as bright as somewhere between magnitude 3 or even as bright as 0, possibly even visible in daylight. So that's really exciting. Currently, it's around magnitude 10.5, so quite viewable if you want to get a preview of it as it's traveling closer to us, as it heads in to the solar system towards the sun. So this shows you the predicted path. So it's passing through Virgo at the moment. So if you want to view it, best viewing will probably be around 11 p.m. to midnight. And in particular, on the 26th and the 27th of April, the same day actually that you might be looking at Comet Pons Brooks earlier in the evening, on the 26th and the 27th of April, it passes very, very close to Zeta Virginis. So that will make it really easy to find. And in fact, here this shows you a simulated view through an 80mm refractor at 25 times. So there's Zeta Virginis, and you can see there the comet's path. So it would be in the same 3-degree field of view from really the 25th through to the 28th. So an excellent opportunity to get a preview of this hopefully spectacular comet that we can look at later in the year. And for further information on both of these comets, Michael Mattiazzo gave a great talk at the ASSA General Meeting in March. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at that talk where he covered in detail both of these comets. So if you go to the live tab on the Astronomical Society of South Australia's YouTube channel, and you'll find it pretty much as at the beginning of the line. And it's called All About Comets. So highly recommended viewing. Our constellation of the month for April is Leo, one of my favorite constellations, because it has a great shape. It's easily identifiable, so it's nice, and it has relatively bright stars, so it's easy to navigate around, and it has some wonderful galaxies within it. So this feature to the left of Leo here is often called the sickle, because it has this sickle shape. So up at the top of the handle is Alpha Leonis, the brightest star in Leo, also known as Regulus. And then the sickle goes down the handle and then curves around to the left. And then the other main part of Leo consists of this right-angled triangle, which also really stands out to the right of the sickle. And we're actually going to look at 8 galaxies in Leo, which sounds a little bit arduous, but actually we're only looking at 3 different locations because there's actually 2 trios or triplets of galaxies included in that list. And it's always wonderful to see groups of galaxies together in the same field of view through a telescope. So our first object is going to be the so-called Leo triplet, and that's very, very easy to find. First, you just go to the right-angled triangle to the right of the sickle. We're going to look at this top star here in the triangle, Theta Leonis. And if you just continue about 2 degrees up and a little bit to the right, you should come across the trio. It's pretty easy to sweep up, particularly if you've got something like a Telrad and you're working under a nice dark sky. So this is a great, fantastic trio of galaxies consisting of M65, M66, and which were both discovered by Messiaen in 1780, and then NGC 3628, which was discovered a little bit later by William Herschel. They're all very interesting objects, best appreciated first with a wide field of view so that you can fit them all. Generally, you can fit them all in the same field of view, and you can really see their different morphologies. These will look oval. You should be able to see the orientation of the halos. And in these two, you will also generally see a brightening in the core. NGC 3628 will then appear as a much fainter but very linear sort of streak of light at an angle to the other two. And if you study it under high magnification with a reasonably large telescope, let's say 8 or even better, a 12 or a 16, I can often see a dark lane and this dark lane in the middle as well. So it's a really, really fantastic field of galaxies. And just as an interesting point of note, you might notice that these galaxies are all gravitationally bound to one another, but M66 here and 3628 are actually closer to each other at about 31 versus 35 million light years. And in the past, they have had an interaction with each other. And it's that interaction that has caused M66 to have this rather unusual distorted spiral pattern. Our second trio of galaxies are also very easy to find. So what we're going to do is move to this star here. So if we imagine a line between Regulus and Theta Leonis, we move about 2/3 of the way along that line to find this star here. And then again, we're going to move about 2 degrees perpendicular to that line. And that'll take us to our next destination, which is another wonderful trio of galaxies. So this trio consists of NGC 3379, sometimes also called Messier 105. It was one of the a late addition to the Messier catalogue, added many years after his death. NGC 3384 and 3389. So as you can see, this is a very different grouping of galaxies to what we saw in the more famous Leo triplet. 3379 is an elliptical galaxy, and I really like this photo because it shows a graininess which kind of is very much what you see in the eyepiece. These ellipticals appear like this sort of diffuse, lovely sparkly ball of light with a slight intensification in the center, but usually not necessarily a sharp nucleus. NGC 3384 is electrolinear. So that's sort of like a bit of a transition point between an elliptical and a more elongated halo of a spiral galaxy. So again, that looks like an oval sort of grainy patch with a slight intensification towards the core. And then finally, we have the much fainter and smaller 3389. So they again make a very nice triplet of galaxies, very different from the previous one we saw. So having enjoyed that triplet of galaxies, our final destination is very, very close indeed, consisting of M95 and M96. And in fact, this circle here is a 2-degree circle. So if you're looking in something like a refractor that has a bit, maybe, or any telescope that can give you a wider field of view, you could even include the triplet that we just saw, as well as M95 and 96 in the same field of view. So this is another great pairing of galaxies. This time again, we're back to face-on spirals. So being face-on spirals, their surface brightness, they're still pretty bright as far as these sort of galaxies go, but the surface brightness is a little bit lower than what we've seen in the last couple of galaxies. So you should certainly be able to see the shape of the halo. You'll see the core and perhaps a nucleus as well. And on a really dark, transparent night in a larger sort of telescope, you may also start to see some structure in the halo. In particular, M95, in a reasonably medium to large telescope, you can actually see this bar that you see here, and it makes kind of a theta kind of TIE fighter sort of shape if you're looking on a really nice dark and transparent night. So that's 8 wonderful galaxies, all very easy to find in Leo. So I hope you enjoy them. Thank you very much for joining me in today's show. I hope you found it useful. There's certainly a lot to see in addition to some of the fantastic galaxies that we've looked at. There's plenty to see in terms of the planets early in the morning in the pre-dawn hours. And of course, if that's not enough, there's also 2 comets to take a look at as well. So hopefully you'll get a chance to view them. Hopefully you get some clear skies. And I really look forward to seeing you in the May show. Until then, take care and bye for now.